Second thing we notice from this line of these passages we just read is that the beast is the Antichrist, full of blasphemy, mocking God. The beast is not our friend. If you're a Christian, the beast will come for you one day, which means you need to make a decision now. Don't wait until then. Well, when I see the Antichrist, then I'll reject him. After I've examined what he has to offer, then I'll decide whether I'm going to choose him or Jesus. No. According to 2 Thessalonians, there's going to be a strong delusion that God himself will send, not to mention the demonic powers and oppression that will be present because of Satan's presence on planet Earth. He's already here now, but he's going to ramp up his activities and his persecution against truth. So if you think, you fence sitter that's watching this video, if you think that you're going to be able to make a sound decision that day, you're deceiving yourself. What does the Bible say? Today is the day of salvation. Don't wait till then. Make your decision now. Read the Bible. Pray about it. Ask Jesus into your heart. Accept him as Lord today. Embrace salvation now. Let the Holy Spirit come into you and begin to prepare you for that day. Because the beast is not our friend. He will pretend to be, but he is not. He is the Antichrist. He's full of blasphemy. He will mock God. All right, and he will take your life if you claim allegiance to Yeshua, the one true Lord and Savior. The woman, we also learn in this passage, is wealthy. She's religiously adorned, right? That's why I talked about the garments. She's holding a golden cup. This is reminiscent of the golden furniture in the temple, and then later the tabernacle, then later temple. The religions of today are fond of using gold. It's not just Catholicism that uses gold cups and bowls and pitchers and utensils and things like that. Lots of religions in the world use gold, but the point is that they're often used in religious ceremonies. So we're not just talking about holding a golden cup as like a trophy. It's not a sporting event that seems to be described by John where she's holding a golden cup. It's not like she just won what is that sport where you win this big cup? The Stanley Cup? Is that soccer? I don't follow sports, but I know that one of them has a cup. A few of them have cups. I think what is that one? Not soccer. They skate. Ice skating. Not ice skating. Hockey, the one that the Canadians play, that Canada's known for. That one I think has a big cup too. So we're not talking about that type of cup. I don't think that's what John. It would have been understood in John's day, as well as our day, as some type of cup related to religious worship, or just a cup that a king might bear, a royalty might bear, that holds their royal wine, right? That says, hey, look, this is a symbol of my power, my golden cup. My what do we call that? What was the name? The Indiana Jones movie, the Grail, right? Not the Grail. Yeah, the Holy Grail. Yeah, that cup, right? The cup of Christ, right? That's a cup for a king, the Grail, right? Is it the Grail? It is the Grail, right? Okay, so she's got a golden cup. She's got this golden Grail, right? But it's filled with abominations, so too bad for her. She's going to be judged one day. Let's keep reading. Revelation 17:5-6. So we're just taking like a few verses at a time. On her forehead, a name was written, a mystery. And then we have this in quotations in the NASB. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth, end quote. So notice it's not mystery Babylon like I keep using, and I will keep using throughout the study, just because it's a more convenient way to describe her. But really it's, on her name was written a mystery, and then there's a kind of a pause. According to the structure of the Greek, it doesn't appear that the word mystery is part of the label on her forehead. But Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And John continues, he says, and I saw the woman, watch this, drunk with the blood of the saints. Not drunk with the blood of those on Wall Street, not drunk with the blood of investors, not drunk with the blood of just ordinary citizens, right? Those who are just trying to make a living. No, specifically, the context of drunk with the blood of saints indicates a religious martyrdom, right? Drunk with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus, not drunk with the blood of those of other religions. So this harlot is going to target those of us who name the name of Yeshua and those of us who hold to our faith in God. When I saw her, John says, I wondered greatly. So that's why we need to be forewarned. If you're a Christian, this system, this beast, this mama harlot, she's going to come after you. And she will be drunk with the blood, which means, look at this. She has a measure of success because it's the blood that she's drunk with. Meaning, they died. Oh yeah, she killed them. Somehow, these are martyrs, right? So we're talking about martyrs in the past, but martyrs in the future. She's drunk with their blood. Let's break it down point by point. She's identified as Babylon the Great, but John emphasizes it is a mystery name, a name that can be learned. So it's a kind of a, there's some research that needs to take place. This kind of, in itself, that her name is mystery, Babylon as a mystery, this alone sort of makes it unlikely that she is just physical Babylon rebuilt, because that doesn't require much of a mystery. I know that's speculation, but consider the logic there, that if it were simply Babylon rebuilt, or if it was simply physical Babylon Saddam Hussein's Babylon, so a rebuilt Babylon, why does mystery have to be attached to that? But again, that's speculation. There could be reasons. Maybe it could be Babylon rebuilt, and mystery just means, wow, Babylon got rebuilt? Wow, I didn't know they were that end times one. But then there are other factors that really don't fit. I mean, did Babylon slaughter Christians down through the ages? Is she responsible for the blood of all martyrs of all time or whatever? Is she even a port city? She's on a major river, but she's like hundreds of miles from the nearest sea, from the Persian Gulf. So anyway, point number 2, by looking at these next 2 verses, she's the mother of harlots, not the mother of all harlots, but she is the mother of harlots, not just unfaithful herself. So her abominations have infected her children. It's not like we've got faithful people in an unfaithful city crying out for God to liberate them from this unfaithful city, but the people are faithful. No, we've got a city whose inhabitants are also playing along with the harlotry. They're in league with the agreement that the city herself represents. So for whatever political, religious, social experiment that the Antichrist is going to be pouring out on the entire world in all its ugliness, the Mystery Babylon city is going to be in league with that. Now, whether she knows it or recognizes it is hard to say. For instance, if it turns out to be eschatological Jerusalem, who perhaps, let's say, embraces the Antichrist at the beginning of the 70th week when he allows her to restart the sacrifices, well then, it's likely that Jerusalem at that stage wouldn't recognize the evil of joining hands with the Antichrist. They would see him as a political savior, some type of liberator of their religion, allowing something that they've been praying for 2,000 years, the reemergence of the animal sacrifices. Obviously, such a person is going to have to somehow get Islam to negotiate positively in favor of Judaism restarting the sacrifices. Nevertheless, my point is that if she is eschatological Jerusalem is Mystery Babylon, then perhaps at that point she won't know that she's a harlot. She won't realize that joining with Antichrist is, as the Bible calls it, making a covenant with death. She won't realize that. She won't know that. She'll be blinded to that. And in fact, like Judaism today, perhaps her own religion will be blinding her to the truth of who Jesus is, like Judaism does today. The biblical lifestyle that God outlined for the people of Israel in the Tanakh, in the Torah, has been corrupted and turned into an idol in the eyes of many Jewish people the world over. And so for them, their lifestyle is more important than their relationship with God through his son Yeshua. And so that would then perhaps could be a representation of her unfaithfulness. As odd as that sounds, but remember, it was Isaiah in the very first chapter who came right out, both guns blazing. you, Israel, I'm sick. I'm paraphrasing what Isaiah said in the voice of God. You, Israel, I am sick of your stinking sacrifices and your holy days. You're bringing all your worthless animal sacrifices to me. It stinks, right? It's a stench to my nostrils. He was laying into them because their religion had blinded them to their idolatrous practices. So will Israel of the future also fall headlong into idolatry? Well, if they embrace the Antichrist as their Messiah, right? He's a false Messiah. Well, then, yeah, that's idolatry, right? Because he's not the true Messiah and he's not their God, but he will pretend to be their friend and thus they'll be deceived. Third bullet point, she's drunk with the blood of the saints, a persecuting city. We already kind of covered that, so let's just keep going. So that's the vision. Let's step back and ask, what does this imagery mean? Who is this woman, and why does John wonder greatly at what he sees? It says he wonders greatly at her. So, part 2, the harlot as spiritual adultery. Let's take about 15 minutes or so to go through this part. Or it could be faster. In my notes, I put these little time markers to keep myself on track. You who are in the live class with me, you can see this as well. But in post-production, you guys can't see this. But I told myself, take about 12 to 15 minutes to talk about this. But it could be shorter. Chris White's first point in his book is that we cannot read this literally as if the woman is an actual prostitute. It's just a symbol. It's typology. In biblical symbolism, harlotry almost always means idolatry and spiritual unfaithfulness, like I mentioned earlier. So let me show you a few examples from the Bible so that we can gain our bearing, get our grounding as to why it becomes important to locate this type of harlotry within a people or a city or a nation that from God's vantage point, should know better, right? I realize that there's this general sense of benevolence and grace and common sense that God has endowed all humanity with, to where God also expects all humans to know better to some degree. Paul talks about that in Romans chapter 1 and chapter 2, that we should know better, right? The entire creation gives us a clue that there's something greater than ourselves that is responsible for everything that we see, right? We can know about God from the very creation. This is Paul's words in Romans chapter 1 and 2. But when we're talking about revelation, it's important to recognize that there's what we could call general revelation, right, to the world through the cosmos. That's just one thing, but there's lots more arguments that we can make other than just the cosmological argument for the existence of God, to where man has no excuse. But when we talk about revelation, there's also something recognized in the Bible that pastors have picked up on. It's called special revelation. So we have general revelation that the world enjoys, and then special revelation that Israel enjoys. God chose her and revealed special revelation to her. So now we're talking about a culpability that's more concentrated based on the fact that she should know better because she has scriptures and revelation and prophets that give her insights that the rest of the world doesn't get. So look at Isaiah 1:21. Quote, how the faithful city, remember I referenced Isaiah 1 earlier, how the faithful city has become a harlot. She who was full of justice, righteousness once lodged in her, but now murderers. This is God pointing his finger at Israel, who's his bride, and he says, look at you, woman. You're my wife. What are you doing with those idols? And he levels the charge of harlotry at her. He can do so because he's the faithful husband. She's the unfaithful wife. And so that's where harlotry is used in a special sense of describing a wife who should know better and whose faithful husband is calling her out. So when we begin to build our candidate for who Mystery Babylon might be, it will be helpful to return to this central biblical point. Let's keep going. Ezekiel brings some charges as well. Ezekiel chapter 16, Jerusalem is compared to an adulterous wife committing harlotries with surrounding nations and their gods. This was the passage I was reading last week that I talked about where it said it turned my stomach when it got to the point where it talked about that she you go back and read Ezekiel 16 and you can see which parts make you sick when you read how graphic God describes her going after her lovers in graphic detail. Just sad, just very tragic the way God sees Jerusalem playing this part in the past. So even at this, let me interject for a moment. Even if we reject Chris White's thesis or proposal that eschatological Jerusalem will be Mystery Babylon, at the very least, we must recognize that biblical Jerusalem in the past was definitely the harlot. Was she the mother of harlots? I don't know if I want to label that, but in terms of harlotry, she was guilty. Guilty as charged. Point 3 that we can recognize, Hosea 1 through 3. We already know that the story with Hosea is that God told him to go marry Gomer, to marry a harlot, and to have children by this harlot. And he did, right? He had one child and named them Lo Ami, and another one he named Lo Ruchama. I think I've got those names right there. Unpitied and unloved, are not my people, and unpitied. Lo Ruchama would be unpitied, and Lo Ami, not my people. And this was God using this picture of his prophet marrying a prostitute. And in this case, he literally married a prostitute. But we know the end of the story, by the way. She gets redeemed. Hallelujah. But nevertheless, in the picture of Hosea, very short book, you should go back and read the whole thing this week. The picture is symbolic of God marrying Israel, and when he married her, she was pledged to him in righteousness. I mean, she said it at Sinai, all that you have said we will do, right? She said, I do. And she pledged herself in righteousness, but she didn't remain faithful. And so God says, Hosea, go marry a prostitute so that the people can understand how I feel. Right? What are my feelings in the matter as the faithful husband? I got to put up with your harlotries. Is it a light thing, Israel, that you play the harlot with all these other nations and dabble in their gods and their idolatry? Is it a light thing? No, let me tell you how I feel about the matter. And so God gets very graphic with having his prophet actually have to marry a harlot. So let's keep going. When Revelation calls Mystery Babylon a harlot, the Jewish reader should, I say would in my commentary, but I'm upgrading it now, should immediately think, this is about covenant unfaithfulness. It's not about physical harlotry, something to do with going down to the local whorehouse and having fun. It's not about that. It's about covenant unfaithfulness. This is about God's people turning from him to idols and worshiping that which is a non-God, right? It's the first commandment all over again. I am the Lord thy God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. And indeed, there are other gods, so-called, in the world. There are other demonic powers. There are other what we call principalities in the heavenlies. Paul describes these as well. We know these exist from the going all the way back to the Tanakh. Just go back and read what we could call Heiser's works on the heavenly. What is his work? He's got a famous book. I'll just flash it in post-production, but he does a lot of good work on dealing with the cosmic powers and forces that exist in the heavenlies. So could it be that type of idolatry? Yeah, but remember, idol worship could be as simple as putting your faith and trust in a human being, like your favorite political leader. If you place your trust for your very life and well-being and your hope in a political power or agenda or position or party, then that's idolatry, right? So biblical idolatry, yes, is primarily covenant unfaithfulness, where you're not keeping the laws that God commanded you and you're not keeping the relationship with God that you're supposed to. But idolatry itself can creep into our lives in many different forms. So that's my point. We just need to be very, very careful about that. I'll say something more about that later on in my study. But considering that primarily covenant unfaithfulness is likely what John had in mind when he's talking about the idolatry that Mystery Babylon is going to be charged with in the end days, this is why I say in my commentary, this is why White points to Jerusalem. No other city in the Bible is repeatedly called a harlot in this sense. Now, we've got some other cities. I know I can hear the comments clacking on their keyboards right now. Tick, 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 tick. You keyboard warriors. You're coming at me right now. You're like, wait a minute, Ariel. What about Tyre? What about Nineveh? They were cities that were labeled as harlots, and they weren't Israelites. Well, we'll talk about those a little later on. There's a way to actually show historically that there was every reason for biblical truth, knowledge of the one true God, that would have been a part of their history. Nineveh and Tyre, Tyre, not Tire, like on your car. Tyre, that postal city in Jerusalem. I think it's like modern day, like Haifa is near Tyre. I think probably modern day Lebanon, somewhere around there. Or is it Syria? No, yeah, maybe Lebanon. But point being, Jerusalem occupies the preeminent spot of being the covenantally unfaithful harlot, the covenantally unfaithful wife who plays the harlot. She's repeatedly the primary city that's elevated in the Tanakh to this position that catches God's attention over and over again. We have one book dedicated primarily to the fall of Nineveh, or not the fall of Nineveh, but the story of Nineveh, Jonah being sent and to warn them about the impending doom. Likewise, we've got prophecies about Tyre that show up in the prophets. Ezekiel brings in the prophecy of Tyre as well. But over and over, Jerusalem gets singled out throughout the Psalms, throughout the prophets, and going into the apostolic scriptures. Rome, Babylon, Mecca, none of them have a covenant with God that they could betray, right? Not to the degree that Jerusalem enjoys. Are there believers in Rome? Yeah. Are there believers in Babylon? Yeah. Are there believers in Mecca? I hope so. I don't know how many could be there with the intense concentration of Islam there. But you get my point, is that the Bible seems to be giving us a picture that we can hold on to. And it is entirely possible that perhaps John was seeing the Jerusalem of the first century, because we know at that point in time they were also largely in rejection of their Messiah, right? Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Jesus lamented in Matthew 23. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to embrace you like a mother would gather her hens, but you wouldn't have it, right? And so then he lamented. He looked at the temple. He says, your house is being left to you desolate, and you won't see me again until you cry out, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. You won't see me again until you cry out, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. He lamented over Jerusalem's rejection of him as their Messiah. What more could he have done? He's holding his hands out. He's like, I've done what I was supposed to do, and you didn't receive me. So could John be referring to that Jerusalem when he sees harlot Jerusalem? Could be. Maybe the preterists have a point. I could see this as being perhaps maybe a near-term fulfillment of harlot Jerusalem playing that part, because she did eventually get destroyed by the Romans, which in this picture, we could picture Jerusalem as Mystery Babylon of the first century, and Rome being the beast that she was riding in the first century. And in that picture, Rome did burn her, right? Eventually turn on her and burn her, destroy her, right? Razed her to the ground. So yeah, that's kind of a near-term prophecy of perhaps what Chris White is saying could be repeated in the end time. So we have near-term, far-term, prophetic telescoping. You guys know what I'm talking about. So Jerusalem enjoys this position. Let's keep going, maybe accelerate a little bit, since we only have about less than 10 minutes left. But we also notice that in the passage that there's the most damning detail. The woman is drunk with the blood of the prophets. She not only is guilty of spiritual unfaithfulness to God, but she's killing God's people, right? And let's ask ourselves the question, who killed the prophets? Jesus actually answers that for us unambiguously, although it's cryptic. So on the one hand, it's unambiguous that he names who he names, but on the other hand, it demands more than a surface level reading. Let me just read and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So Jesus answers the question about who killed the prophets. So read Matthew 23. I put a little note here to turn to Matthew 23, 29 through 37. And let me read these particular selected verses on my screen. Jesus says, "You are sons of those who murdered the prophets, so that," watch this charge, "so that upon you may fall the guilt of all the righteous blood shed on earth." And then he goes into that lament that I mentioned earlier, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to you." Well, this is cryptic. "So that on you may fall the guilt of all the righteous blood shed on earth." And I put a little ellipsis in my commentary. I didn't quote the whole verse, ... because he talks about the blood of righteous Abel to Zechariah, whom you slew between the porch and the altar. What in the world does Jerusalem have to do with the death of righteous Abel? I mean, you ever thought about that? So this is a kind of what I believe might be like what Paul does. This must be a kind of a federal representation of Jerusalem being responsible for the death of righteous people, because literally Jerusalem wasn't even in existence when Cain slew Abel. We're aware of that historically. So Yeshua's words must carry some form of representative weight, similar to the way that I can say that when Adam sinned, I sinned, even though when Adam sinned, I was not around. Adam represents mankind. He's the federal head of humanity. So it's in a representative sense that my sin was captured in his sin. There's a connection there. So that appears to be what's going on with Yeshua. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense why he would lay this charge against Jerusalem when they weren't even around when Abel was alive. Now, it was Jerusalem who was responsible for Zechariah's death, which Yeshua talks about. But Abel, how does that work? This kind of hermeneutic interpretive principle is going to also bear relevance for us later on in another part of this study. So keep this in mind. I'll bring it up again later, so don't worry. So, as I say in my notes here, according to Jesus, there's only one city guilty of the blood of the prophets, and that city is Jerusalem. Notice, this is why I say it's unambiguous. He says, "So that upon you may fall the guilt of all the righteous blood." And I mean, if I were them, I would have raised my hand and said, wait a minute, Mr. Non-important son of Mary from Galilee, you unimportant prophet that, no one cares about. Wait a minute. If I was one of the religious leaders, I would have said, wait a minute, dude, step back. We weren't even around. I'm speaking as Jerusalem. We weren't even around during Abel's lifestyle. How can you lay that charge on us? How can you say that we're guilty of all the righteous blood shed on the earth? Come on. That's a bit too much. But they're not quite understanding Yeshua's thrust. Jerusalem, as God's chosen, is in a priestly position. And the priest is a representative of the people below him. So the priest represents all of Israel, and Israel as a priestly nation speaks for the people of the world. Understand that? There is a responsibility. What did they say? It said best in the Marvel Comics, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Yeah, that's what's going on with Israel. So Jesus is trying to let them know, look, you guys know better. You're God's bride. You're God's chosen. You're the priestly kingdom, priestly nation. And therefore, if unrighteousness is found in you, then we can say that it's your fault for the unrighteousness in other places. So that's kind of the charge. That I think that's one way to make sense of the charge. But my point is that he doesn't say other cities. He levels his charge at Jerusalem at that point in time. So I think that alone is enough to strongly suggest that the harlot city in Revelation 17 is Jerusalem, not Rome or any other city. Now, it's not conclusive, but hey, we can go with something. Let's keep going. Part 3, there's actually like more parts here, and I feel like I'm not accelerating. Maybe what I'll do, I don't want to rush through this. I took a little longer than I should have. I've got 3 minutes left in my hour-long study, and I don't want to make this go really, really long. But honestly, I still need to talk about the woman's appearance, and I also need to talk about the beast that she rides, and then I need to talk about why John wondered greatly So part 5, and then I've got my closing application and preview of week 3. So I'm going to chop this off somewhat abruptly. I didn't make it through as far as I wanted to. It's my fault because I didn't follow my notes closely. I did a lot of extra commentary, but oh well, I'm the teacher. I've got the right to do that. So we're going to break this off. We are in week 2, but we're going to call it week 2 part 1, and then next week it'll be week 2 part 2, or week 2.1 and week 2.2 or something like that. As confusing as that might sound, but we'll stop here dealing with this topic of Mystery Babylon. We'll pick this up next week and then conclude the second part of week 2 on our Mystery Babylon study. But that'll do it for Eschatology, a biblical study of end time events.